So session 5, sponsored by the Port of Seattle and also by United States Department of Transportation, Small Business Transportation Resource Center. And joining us from the SBTRC is the project director, Lily Keefe. Lily, can you go ahead and welcome everybody back to session 5?
I just want to say thank you and hope you guys had a great holiday on behalf of Northwest SBTRC, OSDBU. We welcome you and just want to say special thank you to Port of Seattle, even though they're not here, they will join us later. This workshop is sponsored by Port of Seattle, and I just want to say thank you as well with PTAC as our great partner. And, you know, of course, our team, Tanya Moda and Jessica. And just want to let you guys know if you have any questions or if you want to talk to the presenter after the class, feel free to reach out to Jessica, Tanya and I, or Marnie, or Daryl, and we'll be happy to set up the follow-up appointment. Hopefully you will learn something today, and take away, Jeff.
All right. Got to get rid of that mute button, but I got it. So welcome everybody. Thanks for giving me the opportunity to share a little bit about estimating, right? Today is estimating, but before we get started, you can see in front of you, I'm hoping that you're seeing in front of you, the agenda that I had set up. It's pretty straightforward. An hour is not really the greatest amount of time to be able to, you know, speak to much of what we do in estimating. So I'm really going to try and establish for you a framework of how you can approach what we look at as estimating. And everyone will kind of have a different kind of angle when they look at estimating, but we'll get there. And hopefully that framework, you will be able to carry it with you in the business that you do. And hopefully I'll give you, if anything out of this presentation, a nugget or two that you might be able to work with and develop within your systems, hopefully to make you successful. But as you can see in front of you, the agenda here, the session 5, we're talking about estimating. I know you've had some earlier conversation, I believe, in some other workshops where this might be part of that discussion. Here we're kind of just, you know, knuckling down and getting to the bare bones of, you know, what is it we're trying to accomplish with estimating. And so I'm going to share with you a tool which I call the Takeoff form. And estimating can use many types of forms, and I'm just going to use one that's very general and generic. I believe each of you have a copy of it. By all means, modify it and change it and make it work to your advantage here after today's presentation. That's for you to use as a tool. It's pretty universal, and I'm going to be going through that form because there's a lot of, even though it looks like dry and it's kind of boring, it's like, hey, it's a spreadsheet. What's so exciting about that? There's some really important things in that spreadsheet that I'm going to go through. And so that's going to be the first 20 minutes. I'm going to review that form. Then we're going to do a real simple takeoff. We're going to do, everybody knows how to paint. We've all probably been in our house and done interior work and painted, even if we're not expert painters. But we're going to talk about if we took the mindset of a painter and we were a subcontractor, let's say, painting homes for a living, how they might approach and look at a takeoff. And so we're going to use that as an example to allow us an opportunity to maybe engage in the concepts and learn it through that process of thinking and approaching the estimate itself. And then we'll take the last maybe 15 to 20 minutes and just review and go through that. And at the bottom, I've referenced a textbook that I use at Renton Technical College that the content of what I'm sharing with you tonight is based on. So I just wanted to make sure that I gave credit to the Construction Management Jumpstart textbook, authors Barbara Jackson, and it's her Chapter 8 Estimating Project Cost, page 199. And by the way, I do have a copy of that page if after the course, if any of you are interested in wanting to see that, that's kind of the baseline of what I'm sharing with you today. So I'm going to go ahead, and this will be kind of choppy, but because we're going to be moving around Zoom a little bit. I have a PowerPoint. I'm going to go through that here real quick, kind of give you an idea of what you can expect for today's presentation. I'm just going to stop share right now, and I'm going to come back, and I'm going to, and I always, it's a bad habit of mine, especially in school, but with this whole Zoom and video conferencing, I'm thinking out loud all the time because I have to kind of talk my way through Zoom. If I stay silent, I get confused. And so you'll kind of hearing my thoughts as I go through things. So going to my screen share, and I'm going to go ahead and screen share here. And what you're going to be seeing is the 5 slides that I have to share with you for this presentation, which is Takeoff. Now I'm calling it Takeoff of Painting because I'm being specific, but the idea is that this can be used in all forms, in all divisions of construction, whether you're a carpenter, whether you're a flooring installer, whether you might be in insulation or drywall, whatever your expertise might be, you can use this kind of format. Now, let's see here, let's get the next slide. So what I want to do is I've got a very simple plan here. Most of you have this presentation and been able to download it, and that's great. There's a link that will actually take you to the floor plan to which I've based this short presentation on. You see it there in front of you. It's just a small, tiny house. And we're somewhat familiar with those here locally because it seems to be an idea that's circulated and that we've implemented in some areas of our city of Seattle. And so you see these tiny houses a little bit all over the place. This particular case is kind of a more of a fancy tiny house, if you will, kind of a cottage that would be maybe secondary or tertiary to what would be like a larger residence. And so like a grandmother or a mother-in-law location or piece like that. But it's a great tool for an example. So we're gonna be looking at this for our engagement of learning what a takeoff is. There's some information here, gives you 544 square feet for the area here. I'm gonna get my little annotator so you can follow my cursor. Well, that's not what I want. I want the spotlight. There it is. There's my spotlight. So you can see here, I'm assuming that we have a wall height of 10 feet and that our base, or basically our footprint here of what's you see here is the 544 square feet for the space. So that's just general information. We'll be going back to that though and thinking through how that is valuable to us when we do a takeoff. Now, the second slide is the spreadsheet, right? This is the form that I'm going to go through and speak to you about. And so there's a lot of information here that's of value that you don't really need to write anything down. You can just listen to me talk, but also check out, look at the form, follow my cursor. And as I start to develop some of this information, you can kind of deepen your understanding of what these terms might be and how you might be able to use them when you do an estimate. The third slide here, I really like a lot, particularly the slide and the information off to the right. To the left, obviously, we have the plan. We've been looking at that. Off to the right on this particular slide, above it is a scope of work. I'm going to speak to the importance of scope of work here shortly. And you can see below the bulleted points of this particular plan, which the idea is I'm a painting contractor. I've got these plans. I'm going to put together an estimate, a cost estimate to either try and get the work, or maybe I'm negotiating the work with the owner. And I look at the plans and understanding my business. I see that the scope of the work needs a primer, it needs semi-gloss, and you can kind of see what coverage there is per gallon of paint for the walls. So I can see my drywall primer covers this much square feet per gallon. And the idea is, as we think about estimating, we're thinking about, and again, I'll get to this shortly, how much do we need? How much of stuff do we need in order to do our work? And in this case, the painter needs paint, obviously. Scope of work includes the interior walls. And as you can see here on the plan, we've got walls on the interior of the space. And you can see that we have walls on the exterior. So the interior walls would be those walls kind of dividing and creating the spaces. And then the exterior wall is obviously the perimeter of our building and that exterior piece. And then it speaks to the ceiling. So something we can look at the plan, we can see the walls, we can see the exterior walls. We can't really see the ceiling. But this is what's so great about the image to the right, is I tried to project something three-dimensional where you can see, okay, well, these would be my outside walls, okay? And then I've got my ceiling. In this particular case, it's calling for painting of the ceiling. So I'm assuming that the ceiling, as it looks in this picture here, it depicts drywall or sheetrock. And so I know then I've got these areas that I'm going to need to estimate and determine a number of things as it relates to the estimate or the cost estimate that I'm going to put together for my either bid proposal or in my sit down in negotiations with my owner. Now, further to that image, you can see the young lady painting. She's using implements and artifacts to do that, like a roller and an extension. And we see the paint, obviously, in the different colors of paint. We see a ladder. We see the paint materials, right? All of this is of value that we need to understand, whether it's painting, whether it's drywall, whether it's carpentry, working with wood, that we have these concepts of materials and tools and these things that we need in order to do our jobs. And then lastly, I wanted just to share a slide, is that much of when we do estimates, we may not have all the answers. That we don't have all the answers means that we need to know where to go or identify resources that could maybe help us with those answers, particularly things of nature of costing that we may not have the expertise on, or that we need to find a resource to give us a cost so we can include that in our line item bid proposal. So I'm going to speak a little bit about that in one instance where we have two resources here. One is a link to what we call the guide, which is a local cost data resource that's very useful and that many contractors in the area utilize to their advantage. All right, so that's the presentation in a nutshell. We kind of know and you have a direction of where we want to go. First thing I want to talk about, and I mentioned this in the agenda, was this spreadsheet, right? Let's take a look at the spreadsheet. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to come back, stop the share, and I'm going to share the actual spreadsheet. Now, I believe most of you have this spreadsheet. And if you want to bring it up on your computer, that's fine. Or you can just sit back and listen to me talk. And as you can probably tell, I talk a lot. And so I'm going to really have to move fast in this hour to try and get everything in. So I'm going to go relatively fast, but hold on to those questions because I do want you to ask them here at the end of the presentation. So here we have a template. A template, if any of you know, a template is something we can use over and over and over. We don't have to reinvent it. We can use this template, or what I've called a form earlier, to be able to do cost estimates. Now, when I look at this template, I see a number of words. Like I look at the columns and I see a thing called takeoff. And you've probably heard me mention a few times that word takeoff. Off to the right says estimate cost of work. And then below we have additional information, right? Takeoff, and it says dimensions, and it says PCS. Well, what's PCS? PCS means pieces or a count, like how many. T in feet might be thickness, or W means width, L means length, and it's all in feet. I put the parentheses in feet because sometimes when we do takeoffs of a certain material piece, it might be in inches. And so in some aspects that you may need to change that to inches, right? You have the flexibility with the form, again, to be modified to meet what your needs might be. The takeoff is literally, not flying up in an airplane and going away. And the takeoff is literally, in our business, is to read plans and specifications that we need to take off that information from those plans. And much of what we take off is quantities, right? And so you can see here a column under dimension called QTY. So this QTY, I'm gonna go back here and try and get that highlighter so you guys can follow my cursor. So you can see here, the QTY is a quantity. So when we go to the plans, we're going to find pieces or counts of things that are part of what we do. And so we need to accumulate the amount of that, but also too, we may need to determine quantities through volume. And so we find out the thickness and the lengths and the widths, and we collect that information to determine a quantity. So we get an amount of material. And so you have a quantity here, and that quantity though, and what's really important is this concept of unit. That what is that unit of measure of what you've taken off? And that's going to be key. And I'll talk to you a little bit about why that's so important. But the idea of takeoff, even before we start thinking about pricing, right? Even before that, we've got to know amounts. Amount, particularly, I would say 60 to 70% is just determining the amount of what we need. And in effect, you could say, maybe the phrasing might be the amount of work, right, that we have to do, but that is the bulk of what we need to create, and that could be utilizing materials to do some sort of assembly, right? So when we do that, we need to make sure that we understand what the unit is, and why is that so important? Now, we go from takeoff, which is very different than when we go to estimate cost of work. We're doing two different things here. First thing is we're trying to identify and quantify through quantity what we need to do. And we do that through understanding our scope of work, reading our plans, figuring out what is our areas of responsibility in order for us to, generate what we do, which is a cost estimate, which is the section off to the right, in order to negotiate with the owner to put together a bid proposal. Now, when you look underneath the estimate of work, we've got our quantities of material, let's say. When we look over the estimate cost side, now what we're doing is we're extending the cost. We need to generate more pricing information based on the material quantity that we've collected. And we can further go about determining what our bid proposal will be. And in doing so, we can then extend the costs and have those costs then be the accumulation of what will be our costs to our business to be able to do this work. And then with that information, we figure out our operating costs and our profit margins, those things, and we add that to the cost. So when we're doing an estimate, a takeoff and an estimate and a cost extension, we're literally just looking at what is it going to cost us. And that includes your time and effort, your people's time and effort on staff, the materials that you've been able to take off of your plans that you need to order to make sure that are available for you. And further to the material is, as you can see here in the estimate cost work, we've got the material side. So we can determine the cost of the material here in the orange column. We get a unit price for what that cost of material might be. And then we have a value. We list that total cost right there in the material cost in dollars. Then we go over to the labor, right? This is what it's going to cost of your time to take the material that you need, put it together, and that time and effort is a labor time. So whatever your time per hour is to do something, to put something together and to implement it and execute it, whether you're a subcontractor or a general contractor, that ability to put the labor along with material gives you a full price to furnish and install, which is a fairly typical phrasing that we see in construction. When we estimate, if we're a subcontractor, often we'll be furnishing material and installing that material. So knowing through the takeoff what you need, you develop a material price based on those quantities. From those quantities and the amount and the bulk of the material and the effort there to put it all together through labor, you got a number of hours, you develop or have your unit rate, and you have a labor cost. So the column here of material cost and the column here of labor cost added together gives you a total cost. And all that, if you're a spreadsheet builder, you could probably put all those formulas in this spreadsheet and come over here to the far right and have a total cost, which includes material and labor. Now I've skipped out a little bit here on equipment. Well, equipment might be the need for bringing in a mobile crane, or the need to bring in a lift, a man lift, to be able to do some work in high places. And so that's a project by project basis, but you would add that information into that spreadsheet. And a lot of times, maybe you need some saw cutting done because you've got to do some penetrations in a floor for whatever piping or ducting work that you're doing. You're not an expert in saw cutting, and you wouldn't probably want to self-perform that. That's pretty risky. So you would hire experts to do that. And there you would go out, get some bids from other subs, other contractors, and you would get their values and you would put them in the subcontract column. As you can see from left to right, the process is there in front of you in the form. Step one is you've got to do the takeoff and determine what is it that I'm doing? What is my scope? What's happening? Once that's accumulated, then you move to the further to the right, and then you begin to do that estimate. You put that material price together based on what you need. What is my effort and my crew's effort to do this work? That's the labor piece. Do I have any need for special equipment? You want to make sure you incorporate that into the white section here with equipment. Maybe you can't do the work. It's so of an expert need by others that it's too risky for you to do. So you create and you get subcontractor bids and you put that in here. Miscellaneous is kind of just an overall general, what didn't we catch? And we would put that maybe in miscellaneous. And then you have your total price at the end, right? So in and of itself, the form gives you a process to follow, right? Takeoff, once we've got that information, then we can do the material and the labor pricing. What's it going to cost us, material and labor, and equipment, subcontract, miscellaneous, maybe a catch-all, or maybe there's miscellaneous could be used. Maybe this is a risky proposition. So you've done everything, but you know, we're doing during the wintertime, the weather's not going to be really, really great. Maybe we need to add a contingency in there. So maybe we add a couple $100 just to cover some issues that might be related to weather, right? You're assessing the risk of that work. And then you have a total cost of work using this form. Now, when you do that line item extension, what we're not talking about is that, let's say you have a number of items, if you're a general contractor that you're managing and you're putting a bid together, you would extend all your costs. Down here at the bottom, you would have a cost. In this case, maybe it's painting, which is an example we're going to go through. You'd have a cost, and then that cost then would be taken to a summary sheet. And so there's an additional form, which I'm not introducing to you tonight, but there would be an additional summary form sheet that you would take all your line item costs, add them up together on the form, and then take that one value to a summary sheet, or what we call more formally in the business, even though I don't call it this, a recapitulation sheet. It's very much of a mouthful. And I've never seen in the industry, as I've been in it for 30 years, someone say, hey, did you get that recapitulation sheet done? Now, we don't say that. What we say is we say, hey, do you have a summary of the work that you did? And can you, share with me those, line item cost extensions in a summary line item, please? Something to that effect. All right. So form introduced. Now let's do an example. Let's put something together. So bear with me here as I have to stop our share. And what I want to do is I've got an example. I'm going to bring it up here. And let me just do some change. I want to bring up a couple windows here. So let's see here. I want to bring up, it's a Word document. There it is. So there's that. I'm going to move that over here. Oh, come on. Bring that over here. Shrink that right to there. Maybe, yeah, they'll shrink that to there. And then I'm going to bring up, the form should already be there, right? Okay. All right. So screen share, screen one, up. All right. So here's an example, and I'm going to read through this. So we're going to go through this example. And so what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be going through a couple screens here. So here's our example screen. What we're going to do is we're going to use this painting takeoff sheet. And okay, here's the form that I just introduced to you that we've reviewed that kind of gives us a follow through on a process that we can use. Now, I've already pre-did the form to some extent based on the plan that I introduced to you in the earlier slides, where we had the living room, bedroom, 2 bedrooms, a bath, and a kitchen. Now, I can show, let's see here. I'll bring up that plan here again shortly. I'm going to move this over here, and you can see here that we have a situation where we're going to repaint that living room in that plan that I showed you. I'm going to bring up that plan here. Let me find it. It's going to be in the slide. Let's see, where's that slide? All right, come on, slideshow. Oh, there it is. And so I'm going to reduce this. Go here. I'm going to bring up this plan. There. So I wanted to be able to show you the plan here along with the form, and then be able to go through the plan and also show this example that I want to go through. So let's read through the example. We've got our plan, and I know it's kind of tiny, but I want to be able to show you both screens as we look to try and engage and actually go through the process of doing a takeoff here. So we've decided to repaint the living room. So we look at our plan here, and you can see, let me get my annotate and spotlight. There's my spotlight. There's my spotlight. So we've got a living room here. Okay. And what we want to do is we want to do a takeoff. Now we're looking at the plan, and we say here we want to repaint this living room. We want to go and buy the paint, but we must question. Based on that information, how many gallons of paint do we need, right? How much will it cost, and how much will it cost? So if we take kind of the mindset that, okay, we're a small painting subcontractor and we're doing some painting for this particular client in their residence. And so the basic information here that we're given is a gallon of paint covers 350 square feet. Each gallon of paint costs $27. And we measure the room And we've said, as you can see here off to the right, the wall height for this tiny residence, the wall height is 10 feet. Now, just to skip a little bit here, whoops, wrong way. You guys remember this room here, this kind of three-dimensional look of the room where I shared with you earlier. I want to be coming back to that every once in a while because I want us to make sure that we keep in mind that when we read plans, we're reading something 2D, but it has to be in our mind three-dimensional. And so that's kind of the idea, the wiring that we want to be thinking about, right, when we are doing these types of takeoffs. So we kind of have some basic information. We've got a specification. As we were reading a plan, we have a specific from the owner in this case that they want all the walls and the ceiling in the living room to be 2 coats of paint, 1 color. Okay, easy enough. And we don't need to paint the doors, windows, or trim. So we could do a takeoff on like that, but it would take additional time for our measures today and to be able to do something that you can kind of see in progress. We're going to keep it just to the walls. So then we see the process, right? We need to determine a takeoff. We need to read the plans and we need to do a takeoff to determine the amount of material paint that we need. But in order to do that, oops, let's get back to my form. In order to do that, we can focus on the left side portion here where we have the takeoff. So in this case, we're looking at the living room. I'm going to go ahead and create some space below it just to help us out. And we could continue to add rooms below, or we could continue to create a whole new form and spreadsheet for each room. In this particular case, we're going to focus on the living room. So the living room has dimensions, right? Where did we go? I want to go back. Yeah, so the living room has dimensions. I want to go back to my plan. Where did it go? There it is. The living room has dimensions, right? We see here, and I know it's probably hard to see in your screen, but the dimensions are 10 foot 9 inch by 15 feet. Now, I'm not going to worry about, as this is an estimate, I'm not going to worry about the additional 10 foot 9 inches and have to deal with the 9 inches. I'm just going to say, because we're estimating that the room is 11 feet by 15 feet, because we're estimating. And if anything, I'm being conservative, adding those 3 inches. It's not going to make a great deal in the amount of paint that I need for the project. So when we look at the living room, 11 feet by 15 feet, just to get us in the mindset of thinking three-dimensionally, right? So let's say this is the room, and it could be the room. We've got drywall on all sides of the wall. Now, we don't see the wall that we're looking into, but we have to assume that that wall is going to be receiving drywall and therefore getting painted. And then we see the ceiling has to be painted. So we know then that if we look at this, we've got 11 foot by 15 foot by 11 foot by 15 foot. That is the perimeter of our space. We know our space is going to be 10 feet high, right? Oops, get back here. Oops. We know it's going to be 10 foot high. So as a result, we are looking to determine the square footage for the walls and the square footage for the ceiling. And we don't, in this case, if you look at the living room, it's got windows, right? We've got windows here on the side. We've got a front door. We've got a couple windows here. It looks like we got an entry on this wall to the left here that goes into the kitchen. We don't need to worry about the openings. We're going to do our takeoff right through the openings. And when we say that we don't do the openings, it's not that you can't do the openings. It certainly is additional math that you can do. But if we just take through the openings, we can cover any waste material that we might have with painting. And any of you who have done any painting know it's pretty messy and you've got a good amount of waste. So we don't need to worry about the openings because we don't need to be exact, precise. This is an estimate. So in doing so, we go to the process so we can determine the ceiling area, square footage, the wall area, which is going to be all 4 walls surrounding this living room. We find the total square feet, and then we can find the total gallons of paint. Now, how can we take this information and place it into our spreadsheet? Let's get back to our spreadsheet here. There it is. So we've got our living room. Now, there's not any real pieces that we need to worry about. For me, as I'm thinking out loud, I would say, well, we got the living room. I'm just going to go ahead and say that the living room is 11 feet by 15 feet. Okay. In my mind, that's my perimeter. In fact, if I just want to go ahead, I can just state that perimeter. right? And it's always good to put notes, right? It's always good to have notes to know how you're thinking. So 11 foot by 15 perimeter. Below, maybe I'm going to put another note and say not include openings, right? So I'm not including the openings, means I'm going right through the doors and windows. So you put down, like I'm doing, you think out loud, you put down your information. So you're not having to remember, oh, did I remember that before, you know? And so then you're going back and you're having to do things all over. And when you rework, you're wasting your time. Being a business owner, you need to effectively use your time. And by going back and rechecking, even though it's good to recheck your estimates, by all means do that. If you've got your notes, it'll go much faster. If you don't have your notes of how you've been thinking through this estimate, then you're like wasting time, because then you have to go through and recalculate, and you don't want to do that. You want to kind of do that whole measure twice, cut once mentality. So in this case, we got the living room. Well, we're just focusing right now on the living room. We don't have any pieces, so we don't have to really worry about the piece column, but we do have the dimensions of 11 feet by 15 feet. So I could say 11 feet, and this is now no formulas. I'm just using this as a form. You could use this, you could print it out and use your pencil if you wanted to. So 11 feet, I'm going to say 15 feet, and looks like this didn't work out very well. So what I need to do here is I don't want it to be equals. There we go. 11 feet by 15 feet. And then maybe, you know, this could be the height, even though it says L. If we say 10 feet, we know it's the height, and you could always put a note there, you know, HGT, that's the height of your space. So now you've got information, and now you can start to do the math. Now it's not necessary to have to show the math in your spreadsheet. You know, and this is math that you can just do outright, and knowing that when we look at the plan and we look at our, you know, visual in terms of our 3-dimension, we know that the walls, there's 4 walls, 1, 2, 3, and 4. And of those 4 walls, we've got a height of 11 feet. Now, when I look at the plan here, the perimeter is going to be 11 feet by 15 feet by 11 feet by 15 feet. If you add the perimeter all together and multiply it by 10, you have the square footage of wall that you need. And so what that's going to be, and again, we can put that in a note if you're looking to want to see how that's calculated, right? You could just say perimeter times 10 feet. And that's going to be your square footage that you would want to then possibly, you could put into the quantity over here. So your perimeter is 11 feet plus 15, that's 26, 26, another 11, another 15 is another 26. So you've got a perimeter of 52 times by 10 is going to be 520 square feet. So let me just make sure I get this cell not too screwed up here. I want to make it a note. So the perimeter is going to be times 10 feet. And we have 520 square feet for just the walls, right? So we need to make sure that we're not confused and we say walls. And we can come over here and list our quantity here, 520. Come on. Over here under our QTY, we're underneath the living room, we say 520, and we say in our unit, we say square feet. SF is short for square feet. So now we've just done a takeoff of the walls. So let's do the ceiling, right? Let's come down here, and I'm going to go ceiling. And the ceiling is going to be, let's go look at our plan here. The ceiling up here is just going to be this area. So the area is going to be 11 feet times 15. 11 times 15, what is that? I'm terrible at math. 161 square feet, is that right?
160.
So 11 times 15, it's 165, right? So we could just, we did it by hand. We could go here again and say 11 feet by 15 feet. We don't have a height, it's just an area, and it's 165 square feet. So now in the living room, going back and looking at our plan for the living room, looking at our visual, which gives us that kind of 3-dimensional look, We've got the walls taken off, all 4 walls taken off, and we have the amount of square feet for the ceiling. So we can add these two together, specific to the living room and the painting that we need. And that looks to be 520 plus 100, 620, plus another 65, 620 plus 60 is 680, 685, say about 685 square feet of surface that needs to be painted in the living room. And we were able to take that off. Now, we can come over here. I'm just going to move this over this way a little bit. We can come over here and look at our estimate of cost to do work. We've got our quantities, and then we have a material cost. We have a labor component. Perhaps we need equipment. Maybe we need to rent a sprayer, a paint sprayer to be able to spray paint it, to be able to do the painting maybe in a more even coat fashion. We can do that, no problem. And then maybe if, you know, I don't think there's any need for any subcontract work because we're doing the work. We're self-performing the work. I don't think there's any risk contingency that we need to add in miscellaneous. And so we could end up with a cost here. When we go back to our, get it here. When we go back to our example, right? We've done the living room. We've done the ceiling area here. We've done the wall area here. We've gotten our total square feet, which I said was about 685. I mean, I'm just to make sure we remember 685 square feet of total area that needs to be painted. But then the question is, how many total gallons of paint, i.e. how much material do we need? Right? When we look at this orange column here, how much material do we need? Well, looking at our example up above here, a gallon of paint covers 350 square feet. Okay. So looking at our living room, we've got 685 square feet. 685 square feet. Let's just put that in here. 685 square feet. But looks like 685 square feet times the wall and the ceiling. We've already included the walls and the ceiling, so we don't need to multiply anything by 2 because we've already figured that out. And over here, then it needs 2 coats. Oh, I see what they're saying. Because we're needing 2 coats of paint, we're going to have to double our square footage, right? Because we do 1 coat at 685 square feet. Then we got to do another coat at 685 square feet. So that's why we want to multiply it by 2. So we'll multiply it by 2 times 2. 685 times 2.
1370.
Thank you. 1370, right? So we can say here times 2, 685 times 2. Over here, and we say 1370 square feet. All right, so we've got a total then here of 1370 square feet. Now, what we need to do is determine how many gallons of paint we have. What we could do is go back to our form just to make sure we've got our notes in place, and we can say, I'm going to go here and just say a quick note that total square feet times 2 coats, coats of paint, right? So we have that note that the total square feet is multiplied by 2 as a result of 2 coats of paint. Let's get that right here. 2 coats of paint. Okay, and so we can come down here on our quantity. We know that we have 1,370 square feet. That's our total with 2 quotes of paint. Now we're still talking about the living room here. Sometimes for me, what I like to do is make sure that I know it's a living room. So I'll bold print it. So I know that everything related to this bold print is to the living room based on this takeoff sheet. Now that we've got the takeoff, we go back to, where did it go? Oh, there, it must be right here. We go back to here and we can, let me stretch this out so we can see what's asking. So now that we have 1,370 square feet, we divide that by 350 square feet per gallon. Because we know here, a gallon of paint covers 350 square feet. We've done our calculations. We know we need 2 coats of paint. Therefore, we've doubled the square feet of 685 to 1,370. We take that 1,370 square feet, and we divide that by 350, right? And that should give us a value of probably a decimal, but it's going to tell us how many gallons of paint that we need. So 1,370.
3.914.
3.914. So let's round it up. How many gallons of paint do we need?
4.
We need 4 gallons. So based on that, we can go over here and we can see material wise, we have a unit cost of our paint. Remember that is $27. Now it could be that you know that value before you do your takeoff, and you can come in here and put that as your material cost. So we could just say, let's just say $27 is our material. Well, no, wait, I'm sorry. I don't want to put it there. That's going to be our total cost. Our unit cost is going to be $27. And so over here, our note would be cost per gallon of paint. And we have at $27 here. Over here, we can say we need 4 gallons, and we would have to make sure, this is where the unit column is really important. We know that would need to be 4 gallons. And so we would say 4 gallons of paint, $27. I'll make that a dollar value. And then that material cost, at least for the living room, right? For the living room, that material cost can be 4 times 27, which comes to, what is that? $108. And we can just write that in. $108. So specific to just the living room, get back to, where did our form go? There it is. Specific just to our living room, right? Coming back to our living room, we've got 4 gallons of paint needed for the living room at a cost of $108. Now that is just material, and that's just for the living room. You would need to continue to do that for the bedroom, for the kitchen, for the rest of the interiors of the house. And that includes all the walls. And then on the ends, and we've already covered the living room. So you would do the rest of the bedrooms, something similar to this. When we come and look at our cost of work, then just to the living room, you may look at that. Each of you could look at that and say, well, if I'm looking at a living room like that, and I'm seeing that young lady, and that's about the size of the living room, it's probably going to take me, as I'm a novice, but I'm okay. It's probably going to take me 8 hours, right? So now we're estimating cost of work. So you say 8, and we know it's 8 hours because it's in the 8 hours column. And then, well, as a painter, I've been trained. I'm pretty good at painting. I've been doing it for a while, and I charge myself, even though I'm the business owner, I'm still labor and I'm still producing for my business. I'm $35 an hour. Okay. So you put your unit rate, 8 times 35. In fact, let's make it the easier math. Let's say it's $40 an hour, and that's your labor to paint. Just in that living room, it's you alone going to take 8 hours to paint that living room, which is pretty good, actually. It's going to be $320. Now, what you can do is when you go in the form, if you're pretty good at Excel, you can, change some of these to make it, a little bit cooler so it reflects the dollar value. But now you've got a material cost and you've got a labor cost. You add these two together and you extend it, right? You extend it. We don't need any special equipment. We're not using subcontractors, nothing miscellaneous that we need to add to this. It's pretty straightforward. Just for the living room, I can extend my line. And so I have 320 plus 108, and that's going to be $428.
Jeff, we've got a question.
Sure.
Okay, so this is coming from Ralph. And he's saying that many of the attendees in this session are pursuing public works projects. As such, will you be offering instruction on how to include costs for complying with project labor agreements, prevailing wages, pension payments, etc.?
All right, now that's really complicated. That's complex stuff. And what I'm trying to do is just kind of give you basics on how you would pursue an estimate based on your expertise and whatever that is what you do. Now, when it comes to those resources, you would want to be able to know, as it's stated in the specification, how to access those resources to be able to see their impact to the estimate that you're putting together. So for example, in our situation, let's say that these tiny houses was a federal job at the I'm having a blank here, but the Army base down in Tacoma, right? Our wonderful servicemen down there, we're building housing for them. So it's a federal project, and you need to follow through on making sure that you're doing something similar to this, right? You're identifying your, in this case, we're talking about painting, but you would need to access the resource that would give you the information for prevailing wage. Because if you're merit shop or you're open shop and you're non-union, but you're looking to bid on federal work, then you are due the prevailing wage that any painting contractor would be getting on a federal job. So in that case, you would need to identify where that prevailing wage was in the resources granted to you. And I would imagine that those resources should be readily available. If not, someone can help you find those resources. And then you would list that information in your unit labor of rate. So in this case, just for the living room, if this was a federal project, it could be that your prevailing wage, which pays very well when they're federal projects, could be $80 an hour, right? So you would put $80 an hour as a unit rate in your labor, and then carry that forward. So, obviously we've doubled on our labor cost, and then add that up and extend that to the right. As far as the intricacies of putting together a federal bid proposals, because I know that there are specifics to that, this short hour instruction comes, I apologize, comes not nearly very close to what you would need in something a little bit more complex in terms of the desired needs for a federal job. Because I know that they're pretty specific on making sure not only are your T's crossed, but your I's are dotted before you have a responsive and receptive bid proposal in those situations. So it might be a little bit outside of the presentation for today. But if you do need any assistance, I can certainly try and help you out after class to maybe find out and identify those resources where you could go to get some help on that. All right, so great question, thank you. So, we're to the point, I believe, in the presentation, and I just did, I tried to be straightforward and not make it too overly complicated. I wanted to share with you a form, in this case, the Takeoff and cost of work form, which at this point really is 3/3 or maybe 3/4 of the way through your estimate, because you're extending your totals over here on the form. And when you extend those totals, then those totals will be taken by maybe your boss, or maybe you take that information and you'll take it and apply it into more of a summary sheet that might be what you present to your owner or what you present in your bid proposal. Again, we would do the same operation. You notice I've got a lot of notes and a lot of information just for the living room. And yeah, that, good detailed estimate, giving you confidence that what you've put together for your bid proposal takes work, right? It takes work. And you've got to be able to document and have follow-up, especially if you get the bid, that what your line of thinking was for the cost that you presented. Particularly in this way, is as I begin to think to close our presentation out and be able to look at getting questions from you all, is that if I may ask real quick, if anyone would like to volunteer, what are some of the different types of services or contractors out there and different type of services that are being provided? I mean, I'm just taking painting because I'm reflecting on kind of the universal aspect that we all have some sort of experience with painting. What are some of the other items that are being provided by the student body services? I just want to kind of get an understanding and maybe reflect on some of that in what we're doing today. Does anybody want to volunteer?
I can volunteer.
Sure.
We do a lot of environmental water resource services. So design build. So anything from test sampling to reports. So it's a little different than your typical construction, or we will do construction quantity takeoffs, for instance, for other water resources, if we're building wells or wastewater treatment plants, or you name it.
Sure, no, and that's a specialty niche, right? So, that's a valued commodity because there's not many people probably doing what you're doing, which makes you valuable. And so the work you do will be nuanced, right? I'm really being broad and general in the approach, but I don't think there's anything in the practice that I shared that isn't anything two very different than your practice outside of, yeah, it may be that you're not looking to gain a quantity of materials, but you need to look at, in a design build situation. I mean, you're part of probably that design element. So you're actually creating the scope of work, maybe considering value engineering on the type of materials that might be used or not used in the project, working that through with the engineers and the architect and the owner to come up with something that would be then furthering on what would be an extension of cost, that if you're negotiating the work, obviously then that becomes part of your contract. If it's a bid situation, maybe you're putting together a request for proposal to try and get onto a team or get onto the short list, then you're being creative, but then also generating maybe general estimates of what costs might be included in the materials that you provide in the work that you're doing, the use of those materials in the service of what you're providing. And there's a labor component, obviously your expertise and the time and professional effort that you have to incorporate to bring it about. And so I think it all still stays consistent to what we want to do. You always have that need to define the scope, which is what the takeoff is, reading the plans, listening to the owner, defining the scope of work. And then once that has some teeth to it, then you're looking at, okay, what materials, whether the materials I supply or the materials that I need to be provided in the work that I do, what do I need there? What are the costs involved with that based on your scope of work? And then start to develop the compilation and the assembly piece of your time and effort as a professional, i.e. the labor, to put it all together and then do that extension. If it's something that's outside your league, but something that you need to be part of your team, then maybe you look for a subcontractor. So maybe you're not a soils engineer expert, but then you need to bring in that civil engineer who understands the mechanics of the soils to come in and to work with you and be part of your team. That could be part of that request for a proposal, which then you would create a line item for that particular contractor in your subcontractor column, and then extend that. But no, sounds like a real interesting work that you're doing there.
Well, I mean, we can do it. We have several entities within our company where we can take on the design, we can do the design build and the construction. So we may have, or even the planning. So if we might have a 100,000 foot is what we would like to call it, estimate that kind of just gives maybe a budgetary cost, then we might whittle it down with once we hit design, maybe break out subs, we'll see. And then if we're performing the construction, then we'll do construction cost estimate bidding. Depends on what contracting element we use, but we'll essentially could kind of do all the things you just mentioned and
it's not right. And it's phased, right? You might have to put that 1,000 foot level rough order magnitude estimate early on, because not everything's clearly defined, just to get the ball rolling and get people thinking about the design. And then as that starts to get more defined, then maybe there's a request for you to provide a professional services contract, which when you're providing a professional services contract isn't any different than if you're doing an estimate. Kind of what I shared is you're determining, what is really a lot of it is your expertise and time and labor. But if there's any material costs or things of that nature, probably limited at a professional service level. But as you work towards the end and then your company strategizes, says, hey, maybe we can do this full meal deal. Let's design it and let's build it. Let's use our guys and let's self-perform and let's make some money on this thing, right? And so then you're probably getting actively involved. The one thing I didn't mention, and so I'll close it with this right now, because this conversation is bringing it up, is all of you have a certain amount of time in the industry here. And I'm going to go back to my slideshow here and open it up. All of you certainly have different varying amounts of experience. Some of you may have just been started your business and have been doing it for 3 or 4 or 5 months. Some of you may have been doing it 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years. The one thing that I always read about when I'm putting together information and study plans and lesson plans in my program, one thing I always read about constantly, even when I go online and do some research on the web, is that as a contractor, you need to retain the historical costs of the work that you performed. So you can put an estimate together and have have that proposal and you've got the contract and you're going gangbusters and you're going to make money, but document what your actual costs were and hold on to that and start to create a cost database for your business. I mean, this is your differentiator, if you will. This is what's going to make you competitive and allow you to make money, is start to build on that historical cost database. One of the things I was mentioning today, and may not have enough time to talk to you about it, but I use two very straightforward estimating resources in my construction management program. One is called the guide. Some of you might be familiar with the guide. I'll link it up here and show you what it is. But the guide is a document, cost data. It's local, used in Alaska, Washington, Idaho, and Oregon. But the majority of the work is here in the Seattle area. And every construction company I've worked for, which has been about 5 or 6 over the course of the last 30 years, every one of their estimating departments had this as a resource, almost as a go-to manual in case they were in a situation where they needed to, fill in a line item price and they weren't getting any subcontract proposals. The guide is cost data, generated from all the contractors in the area, and it gets specific to various lines and scopes of work. In fact, we could go in there and find information about what we talked about today, which is painting. I wouldn't doubt that we would be able to find similar information that we could use in our spreadsheet as it relates to painting. Now, ours means is broader. It's nationally based rather than locally based like the guide. It's much broader. But all this is information. And my point is this, is that as your business begins to do projects, makes profits, is banking on those profits based on the historical data that you put together, not the estimates that you put together, but the historical actual cost that you have. That's information that you can bank to use in future estimates. I mean, that makes sense, right? Because you don't necessarily have to go to other outside resources, but your business has been in business for long enough to know and to be able to develop unit measure pricing for materials, unit measure pricing for the labor within your group. That's to the advantage of you as a company, particularly for those companies that look to self-perform. There's two things when we talk about estimating. There's self-performance, which is that you do the work, whether you're the general contractor or whether you're a subcontractor. The opportunity for you to do the work means that you can increase your margins. You can increase your profit margins if you do the work. Yes, it's risky, but if you're really good at it, you're going to make money. If it's really risky, you're not going to do it. What are you going to do? You're going to hire a subcontractor, or you're going to get subcontractors to look at the plans and say, hey, can you be part of my team? I'd like you to work for me. I'll pay you to do this specialty work while I, self-perform some of these other items. So it really is a balancing act. Sometimes you might want to self-perform work. Sometimes you might not want to. Just all depends on the risk. And it's interesting that we talk about risk, particularly when it comes to estimating, because that's what you're in the business of. What amount of risk are you willing to carry on the work that you are specially good at? What amount of risk are you willing to carry, right? And the more risk that you carry, the more profit margin that you would charge for that, obviously, but also too, the greater the probability, the chance that you could fail, right? And so that's why you jump the margins, because you might fail because you're taking on a risky project. So it really becomes business decisions on how you want to manage your risk, particularly when you're doing estimating, right? A lot of things to think about that you might be doing that you don't even know, right? So hopefully maybe I've triggered some things in your mind to get you to think about more on a strategic business perspective on making sure, hey, am I bidding the right jobs? And do I have the resources necessary to do the work? And do I feel good and comfortable to self-perform this work, right? Hey, real quick, because I know we're getting close to the end here. I want to open up for some quick questions, but here's the guide. And it doesn't look like it's going to be able to open for me, but I wanted to show you here the guide here, what it looks like. I got to open up if you go to best construction site, here's what it looks like. Now, this is an online version. Here on the right, this cost data book is a great book. You can contact the person up here. I forgot the person's name, but it's almost like talking to family. They're really super nice people. And you might be able to work out an arrangement to maybe get a subscription or be able to try it out. Just let them know that you were at this Port of Seattle presentation. You can mention my name. They know me down there. I'm sure that they'll be very helpful and be able to provide for you any opportunity to share the information. They come out with the guide a couple times a year. and it's just a great resource to have. But you can see here, I'm just going to give you an example. If I come here to here, it says material cost data. If I come to material cost data, I'm going to go down to finishes. Finishes is a division which I know the painting is part of. I come in here and I got a code that I got to put in here. So let's see if I remember it. And here's what it looks like, right? This is the online version of this database. So when I look at the table of contents here, I'll try to explode it here so you guys can see a little bit closer. You can see in Division 9 has a lot of things that some of you may be familiar with based on the work and business that you've done in the past. You can see here, right? Division 0991 paint, and you would go to section 910. So I'm gonna scroll to section 910. Sorry about, making you sick about this because I don't like to scroll real fast like that, but is that 910? Or I know we're close. There's 910. So here's 910, and you can see here when you read this, you've got the unit. Remember, we talked about the unit in my form. We've got the unit of measure, square feet, and that's for wall coverings. Let's see if we can find paint. There's paint right there. Paint and coating. And it says paint interior latex primers. And here's the primers. We were talking about just regular paint. Let's go with semi-gloss. That's the first thing that comes to my mind. Contractor semi-gloss paint for 1 gallon, because the unit you see here is gal. For 1 gallon, $27, $28 a gallon. Hey, we were pretty close. We were doing our estimate, if I remember right, we were doing our estimate at 27. So you can see here, based on the example I gave you, and if we use the semi-gloss here, paint interior semi-gloss, you can see here we're looking at $27.81. The unit is gallons, and the one here means per gallon, 1 gallon, okay? All right, well, I know that we're coming close to 2:10. We got 3 minutes for any additional questions.
Jeff,
we flew through that, so I'm sorry if I missed a lot of stuff. What, yeah?
Jeff, so remember last time I sponsored the guidebook for my Renton Technical College ABC Construction Business School. Do you remember how much it cost to be a?
Oh, well, you know what? I will say this. I think that for the tried and true and those who have been subscribing for a good deal of time, I believe that, there's a certain price and probably not, it's probably more catered to that medium to larger general contractor. Doesn't mean that the smaller contractor can't use it. I think that there's room for negotiation. I guess what I'm saying as I'm going around long, but it can be expensive.
Yeah,
But,
so because I remember I bought the book for the participants. So I'm definitely would like to explore that with our participants here with the Port of Seattle,
Yeah, I think
yeah.
I agree. I think that there should be the ability through economies of scale that you have a number of stakeholders, the student body here that have been coming to the Port of Seattle workshops.
Sure.
That would be interested, that you should be able to talk to them. Now, the other thing too, if you hit a roadblock, contact me and I'll look to help you out as well.
Yes. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to talk to them because I knew I bought like 20 or 30 books in the past, and now definitely will, I can't promise, but I am almost 100% sure I could help you guys, whomever that in this class interested, contact me and I'll be happy to provide that additional, access for that book.
So I'm on their page, Lily. It's about $251.85 a year. And that includes the 1-year subscription to the guide. And then they update their book every 6 months. So that includes 2 issues. And then the internet password
Okay, guys, talk to me after the class. Whomever interested, I'm down to sponsor that.
Mm-hmm.
Perfect.
And I would say too,
Awesome.
I would just go to and add, Lily, that if there's strong interest and you have a need for, maybe some quick training or tutorial on how to use it, just let me know. And then maybe we can do maybe I can help you out with some sidebars, 15, 20-minute chunks of, how your students can take advantage of it.
So I'm going to contact them this week, and then definitely contact me and I'll be happy to sponsor you guys to get that service. Okay.
I think that's great. I think that's a great offer, everyone. If you get that chance, it's a wonderful book to have in your library. at some point in time, it's going to be worth that value. I mean, if you take the subscription, what, $250 over 12 months, you get 2 issues twice a year, and incorporate that into your overhead expenses, and we're talking dollars.
Yeah, because I remember I sponsored that with our bonding education. Tanya, this is actually a great, DBE, I mean, like support service that we could help with our participants.
Yeah, our participants that are DBE certified, what we should do is we should approach DBE support services to see if they can purchase in bulk.
Yeah.
And then, so that they can have it, right, as part of their certification, because we're not talking about, $3,000. We're talking about $251.
Oh yeah, and of course SBTRC. I mean, I'll make it happen for you guys.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and
But,
then yes,
we need to, yeah.
Ralph, that's a good idea. I'm gonna talk to them about the discount for federal agencies. Thanks.
So Jeff, there was another question that came up. I know that when you were going over, I know that, like you said, this is a 1-hour class and we can't get into all of the nitty gritty, but at some point in your spreadsheet, the amount that you're putting down that you're charging per hour, that's not a fully burdened rate. That is just, it could be just the whatever rate we're supposed to be charging. So if it's a Davis-Bacon wage rate, if it's, a state rate, if it's private.
Yes, the answer is yes. So when you're doing your cost estimate, okay, certainly you have what we call the burden of labor or labor burden, right? And so again, this is nuanced, but labor burden is going to be if you've got a small business and you've got 5 to 6 people that you're taking care of, right? You love your employees, you're taking care of them, so you've got health insurance for them, you've got maybe some sort of profit benefit plan, bonus plan, all of these kind of extracurricular components that can be added to what would be your straight cost for labor would need to be added. And so you would add that in the spreadsheet that you have here in front of you, you would not include that in your estimate cost of work. Okay, you would not include that. So you would extend it to the far right with your totals, but then the next step, and we didn't talk about this step, but the next step would be that if you're the boss or if you have an estimator in your business who's kind of doing all the estimates for you, they would take that blue column of total and extend it to a summary sheet. And then once they get all the costs from all the work from maybe a number of these spreadsheets that have been put together by the team, then they would go ahead and then incorporate additional percentages that would cover, in this case, labor burden. Or if it were a federal project, certainly we want to make sure that in your unit rate of labor, you would want to incorporate that prevailing wage and make sure that you're resourcing the right information to make sure that you've got the right prevailing wage in there. Because I've worked on prevailing wage projects as well, and it's just the paperwork intensity of it all is pretty incredible. But once you get into the system and then get that going, then it just becomes a matter of protocol and habit. But that's a project management issue. As it comes to the estimate, you got to make sure that you have that right number in there in that labor rate, and that would be the prevailing wage rate. And I would assume that any additional burdens would be added onto the summary sheet that would be later in the process. I think that's all I got. And I don't know, does anybody have any additional questions? Well, one of my earlier questions was, if we have a few minutes, was just the one gentleman shared with me their services and operations, and that was really interesting to hear that. Is there any other businesses out there that would like to share what they do? Just because I'd like to get an idea of the type of services that have listened in.
Yes, my name is Tamara Harris, and I have a flagging company.
Fantastic. Flagging. It's really interesting. That is such a vital component to any contractor's position, particularly if they're performing work, on a busy street or a corner or main and main. Recently, I just had a conversation with my students where we were looking to see how we organize the job site, right? So when we start to build a building, we need to organize and arrange our job site in a way that it's efficient. Well, part of that is when you bring in big cranes in, or you're bringing big trucks, or the concrete trucks have to come in and back in particular manners and way. If you don't have that flagging person there to make sure everything is safe as a contractor, then you're not doing your job. And so that would be a line item. Your work would be a line item in a general contractor's bid proposal. But for you, it is probably, small tools and materials that you would need for flagging. But in addition, whatever other material like components or equipment that you would need to be able to service that particular operation. It's interesting. What type of materials or equipment do you use in your business?
Yeah, I like how you brought up the Takeoff. That was very good. We use signs, flagging paddles, signs, the stand. So I like how you gave that example for the Takeoff, and then the plans and the specs and the scope, because it all runs into just what you said.
Right.
All that goes into the bid. Yeah.
Right. What's interesting about your work is that construction projects, every one is different. And so with the service and operation that you provide, it may be in your bid proposal that the contractor's looking for you to have signs made. And you're like, well, I'm not a sign maker, and I could do the signs and self-perform, but I don't make really nice signs. My lettering's maybe off a little bit. Maybe I need to go find a sign company to give me some bids, right? So then that sign company would look at your plans, give you a proposal, and then you would get that sub bid from the sign company, and you would add them in your subcontract part of the estimate.
And that's exactly what I did. They sent in certain signs or certain sizes, so certain jobs want certain size of signs, and it all goes by the speed limit. The lower the speed, the smaller the signs, the higher the speed, the higher. So yeah, that's really good. I really enjoyed how you gave your example.
Tamara, you're on top of it. You know what you're doing. You got that. You got it down. Yeah, you're doing. That's great.
Working on it. Thank you.
Yeah. No, that's awesome. You got it. You'll be fine.
Okay. Appreciate it.
You bet.
Got one more question from Rose.
Sure.
Hi, good afternoon.
Hi.
I am a signs and graphics company, so I make signs. And we've got many bid opportunities, and I'm learning over the years how to read them a little faster and where to find my scope and, find the sign schedule. So I did in the very beginning, when I first started bidding, I was granted through WashDOT a mentorship program, very similar to your spreadsheet. And I used it in the beginning, but I really didn't understand it, know what I was doing. And now I have a better understanding. So I was able to follow you a little more. But I know that there's things that need to be included, like insurance. He told me to include that in your bid. All my admin work, you need to take those expenses into consideration. So, and MOB, there's a lot that goes along with rather than just showing up and installing a sign.
Right. And that's a great question. So you need to make the separation. And this is what I'm telling you, and all of you have flexibility. It's your business. You have frameworks to work with and be creative. There's not one particular set way that you can do something. That's why to be entrepreneurial, which many of you are if you're running a small business, you're entrepreneurs, you're creative. You are what drive, much of what is our country, is those people who are independent and drive their own business because you want to do that and you want to be good at it. So be creative in how you draw that up and differentiate yourself in that way. But what I'm sharing with you is, you've got to know what is it that you're doing, right? That scope of work that you mentioned. Once you know that, then it really is a dive down into the next section of the estimate the cost. Okay, now I know what material, what's going on. I know what I need to do. Now, how much material do I need, and what is the unit cost for that? If I'm self-performing using that material, then I've got to get a labor number for that. If I'm not self-performing, then I've got to go out and contact companies that can provide me the expertise that I need and make them part of my team. So then you look for subcontract proposals, and it's simple there. They should know what they're doing. If you've done your due diligence, give them a set of plans and say, hey, I need my bid by, December 5th. And if you have any questions, let me know. If they're asking you questions on how to read plans, probably not a subcontractor that you want putting a bid together for you. But you get the idea that they know what they're doing. They'll get a bid for you, and then you use that and put that number in your subcontract price. You guys have everything there. You've got the expertise. Now it's a matter of just organizing it, right? And really the form is a matter of a framework to get you organized and to get you thinking about your scope and your expertise and what you do so well, and then getting the numbers in place so you have a fair shot of getting the work and making money, right? That's why you guys are doing this, is you want to make some money. And as you get better at it, right, hold on to those actual costs, because that's going to be estimating information that are going to be your go-to numbers that you can go back to and incorporate into future estimates. Same process, only you're using numbers that you have verified through actual work, which makes you competitive and it differentiates you, right? It makes you different from the competition because these are your numbers, you own them, and it makes you competitive. So just remember that. Make sure that the data, that you take that extra time after a successful job and go, phew, all right, let's go to the next one. But it's like, phew, now I got to get to work, take my actual cost and create my database, because this database is going to be golden as I build my business and grow over the next 3 to 5 years. I know for small business, it's a lot of work, but you can do it. You just got to get those numbers and lock in those historical costs.
I'd just like to add one thing that since I was on this meeting today, I'm working on a big project out in Totem Lake, and they asked us, the contractor asked us if we had a relationship with a painter because they needed some painting. And in your presentation, you talked about subcontractors. So I thought, well, what the heck? I think I'm just going to run it, because I was just going to refer it out to a painter. But then I got to talking to my business partner. He said, no, let's just keep it. We'll hire somebody, subcontract it out. So that's what we're going to do. And it's quite a big project. So,
So my advice there would make sure, obviously you have a line item budget, or maybe if you're continuing to work on it closely, but make sure that you have your scope of work understood, whether you self-perform or whether, who knows, a week or two from now, something changes and you look at your partner and you're like, we may have to sub this out. The idea is that make sure you have budgeted and that you have enough money to cover not only your self-performance, where if you choose that, you can maybe have the opportunity to make some profit, or you have enough money that's going to cover your costs, at worst case, cover your costs to perform that painting subcontract with a subcontractor. You leave your options open. I think it's grand that you would want to self-perform. Just do your due diligence, right? So go out and talk to good painting subcontractors that are available, because I know it's really busy out there. But do your due diligence and find good subcontractors that you can interview, talk to, get their resume, talk to people, other contractors who've worked with them, right? Do your due diligence to make sure that if you do use a subcontractor, that you can trust them, right? And you can trust their number.
okay, thank you.
Make sure that they can bond, Rose.
Yeah.
And make sure you collect the bond, because your company is on the line when you subcontract. If you don't have a good subcontract agreement, coming up later on this afternoon is Ruben Ortega. He's an attorney, construction attorney. So if you don't have a strong subcontract agreement, I would suggest that you have a conversation with Ruben. Okay, because part of what will protect you is not just the bond, but your subcontract agreement, and being able to write up whatever that scope of work is going to be, so that everything, and scheduling, understanding the scheduling. So there's a lot to subcontracting. It's not just, hey, you know what, it's a small little room. You got to understand the risk. The reward is there, but you've got to understand the risk, because you are going to mark up their price and you're going to make an override on them. But remember, along with that risk, comes the reward, right? But you just got to be able to protect your company.
Okay.
I'm glad that Ruben is on today, because then you can kind of ask some questions about that.
I think that's a great point. The questions to talk to Ruben about is, as a business, when is it a good time, Ruben, that I might feel I can self-perform versus when it might be a good time that I subcontract? And then getting that opinion from an attorney may be insightful.
Okay.
Well, Jeffrey, we want to say thank you so much for joining us today in our session, and for the information that you provided and the overview that you gave us. It was great. Gave us a lot to think about. And I know that there's a lot more that we need to learn.